Hello and welcome to This Week in Fantasy LCS, where we look at projected results and sleeper picks for Week 3, as well as some surprise performances from last week. The first thing we look at is how I calculate the estimated points. We use a predictive model based on the player's performances split, and then add a matchup factor for the upcoming week. To illustrate this model, let's look at ElmQ Support more. In weeks 1 and 2, he averaged 14.98 points per game. This week, ElmQ is against Complexity and TSM. Supports playing against Complexity earn 93% additional points, and supports playing against TSM earn 0.9% additional points. This means we project more to have a 46.95% points over his average, or 42.3 total points this week. To see more information, check out the full matrix down below. So let's take a look at the results of last week and the projected rankings for top lane. Last week, Youngbuck had a surprisingly huge week, getting the most points in his league, and getting as many in 2 games as he did in 4 games of the first week. On the other hand, the 3 big leaders of week 1, Kevin, Dyrus, and Ackerman, ended up near the bottom of the table. One thing to keep in mind when setting your lineup is that teams who win score on average 2 to 2.5 times more points over losing teams, so it can often be better to start a winning passive player over a losing playmaker. With that in mind, here are the estimated points for the upcoming week. We will see a trend of ElmQ players being near the top because of their easy matchups this week. Similarly, Dyrus has been a shining light on TSM, and is currently second among top laners in points per game. This is truly impressive given TSM's 3-3 record. My sleeper pick would be Freddy112, who's playing against Millennium and Gambit this week, and is thus expected to get above average points. Next will be Jungle, where again the Copenhagen Wolves top the charts with Airwalks, their new jungler. He had a huge week, getting 10 points over the second place person. For estimated points, Airwalks is expected to have another good week, despite their poor 2 and 4 standings. He might be available on some leagues, so he could be worth the risk if you have a weak jungler position. One player to bench this week would probably be Dexter. COG has a tough week against 2 of the top teams, Dignitas and Cloud9. These are the 2 stingiest fantasy opponents in North America, and so Dexter is expected to get 36% less than his average points. On to mid lane, where we see the 2 unlikely players Cowtard and Selfie top the chart for last week. Bjergsen, however, one of the top performers week 1, actually got the least points. Looking at the estimated points, however, we see a return of Xiao to the top of the list, and expect him to have a big week. Kerp is ranked second, but I think he might be a bit overrated by this estimation method. Millennium are going to have an average week, with their opponents being SK and Copenhagen Wolves, but Kerp's huge week 1 performance is skewing the data a bit. My sleeper pick would be Voyboy, who might have a breakout week going against TSM and Complexity. Curse's numbers have been a bit underrated because they have had a very tough last 6 games, playing all of the top teams early in the schedule. In the AD carry estimates, we see an explosion of EU, with Vasily topping the charts, but 4 EU AD carries following. The interesting thing here is that we see Cop as the second ranked NA carry, with stars like Sneaky, Doublelift, and Wild Turtle below him. This makes Cop my sleeper pick for the week, as we know Curse has a weaker schedule, but I also think that Candy Panda could have a big week. If you have Rocket players in your lineup, I would keep them benched because they've already been struggling and are going against Fnatic and Alliance this week. The next role to cover is Support, the role that is most affected by win-loss. Supports who win get 2.7 times a losing support, so picking winning teams is super important in that support role. Pay close attention to your matchups, because for example we saw Glebe Glarbu get the most points for a support in week 1, while in week 2 we can see he actually netted negative fantasy points. We also saw a surprising strong performance out of We Will Failure, who broke the CW trend. Looking to week 3 though, we are expected to see big points out of N-Rated and Xpecial, who have been delivering strong performances relative to their teammates. Crepo had a strong week last week, but I would move him to the bench this week as EG is playing C9 and Dignitas. Last thing to look at is teams. Winning is obviously important for teams because winning teams average 9.6 towers, while losing teams average only 4 towers. Due to the nature of pushing for the win, winning teams get way more points than just the 2 additional victory points awarded in the fantasy system. Similarly, game length is a factor, as the more dragons and barons that spawn, the more potential points for a team. So the best team picks are winning teams that play long games. Dig had the most points last week with 40. 20 points per game is pretty much the highest we can see given how teams are scored. Super Hot Crew also had a great week, tying the hyped Alliance squad. At the same time though, we saw fan favorite TSM get about as many points as Complexity, and is a sign of their team suffering this split. For next week's estimates, however, we see less extreme results. Dig is still favorited to get the most points, but ElmQ is looking like a favorite in my book. Alliance has a somewhat average week, with their opponents being Roccat and Super Hot Crew. My sleeper team pick is SK, who I'm predicting to have a 2-0 week. And lastly, I would bench Super Hot Crew, who's going against the two tough teams of Fnatic and Alliance. If you want to take a closer look at the tables, check out the article. Good luck with your picks and see you next week.